Welcome back to another episode of Infidelity Tales Lab. We're thankful for your continued viewership. Before we begin, tell us, where in the world are you watching from? We love knowing our global reach. Now, let's dive into today's story. Chapter 1, Shattered Foundation. Tony Walsh slammed his hand against the steering wheel as he raced home, his daughter Lily's frantic voice still echoing in his ears. "Dad, come quick!" The urgency in her voice had sent ice through his veins. He had never heard his usually composed 19-year-old daughter sound so terrified. Tony had built his life on control. As the owner of Walsh Security Systems, he'd spent 20 years building an empire that protected the wealthiest families in Boston from threats. The irony wasn't lost on him as he sped through yellow lights toward his own home in Brookline, a sprawling colonial that now had 2 ambulances parked outside. His tires screeched as he pulled into the driveway. His 17-year-old son Brady ran toward him, tears streaming down his face. The boy's athletic frame was hunched, vulnerable in a way Tony hadn't seen since Brady was a child. "Dad!" Brady grabbed his arm with surprising strength. "Mom's been hiding something from us. Please help us." He pulled Tony toward the house. "There's something scary in Mom's room." Tony's mind raced through possibilities: drugs, weapons, suicide attempt. What could his wife of 22 years, Diana, be hiding that would cause this level of distress? The front door was propped open. A police officer stood in the entryway, taking notes. 2 paramedics emerged from the hallway leading to the master bedroom, their faces grim. "Sir, are you the homeowner?" the officer asked. Tony nodded, unable to find his voice as Brady clung to his arm. "Your son and daughter found something disturbing in the bedroom. We're still assessing the situation." Tony broke free from Brady's grip and strode down the hallway. Lily stood outside the master bedroom, her face ashen. When she saw Tony, she shook her head slowly, as if warning him. "Daddy, I just wanted to borrow Mom's necklace for my date tonight," she whispered. "I didn't know. I swear I didn't know." Tony stepped past her into the room he'd shared with Diana for over 2 decades. The bedroom looked normal at first glance. King-size bed, made with Diana's obsessively neat hospital corners, her reading glasses on the nightstand beside her half-finished novel. But there was one thing out of place. The walk-in closet door stood open, and Diana's carefully organized designer clothes had been pushed aside. A panel on the back wall lay open, revealing a hidden compartment. Tony had installed state-of-the-art security throughout their home, but had never known about this secret space. A police officer stood near the opening, photographing its contents. When he moved aside, Tony saw what had caused the chaos: a man's body, contorted and lifeless, with a bullet wound to the chest. "Mr. Walsh," said a detective who materialized beside him. "I'm Detective Summers. Can you identify this individual?" Tony stared at the corpse, recognition dawning with nauseating clarity. Richard "Rich" Dawson, Diana's college sweetheart and now her business partner at the gallery they co-owned. Tony had always distrusted the man's slick charm and the familiar way he touched Diana's arm when they spoke. His suspicions had been right all along. "That's Richard Dawson," Tony managed. "My wife's business partner." "And do you know where your wife is now, Mr. Walsh?" Tony realized suddenly that Diana was nowhere to be seen. "No, she should be at the gallery downtown." Detective Summers exchanged glances with another officer. "We've put out an APB for your wife. Based on preliminary evidence, we believe she may have information about what happened here." Tony's world tilted on its axis. The control he prized had been an illusion. His perfect wife, the cultured, sophisticated woman who had built her reputation as an art dealer while he built his security empire, had kept secrets darker than he could have imagined. "Mr. Walsh," Detective Summers continued, "we found some concerning materials in this hidden room besides the body. There are multiple passports with your wife's photo, but different names. Several burner phones, and approximately $200,000 in cash." Tony felt the blood drain from his face. Diana wasn't just having an affair. She was living a double life he knew nothing about. As the reality crashed over him, Tony felt something hardening inside. The shock gave way to cold, calculating rage. No one betrayed Anthony Walsh and walked away unscathed. No one, He turned to Detective Summers with a composure that masked the storm brewing within. "Whatever you need from me, Detective, you'll have my full cooperation." But silently, Tony made a vow. He would find Diana first. Chapter 2. Buried Secrets. Tony sat in his home office, the door locked against the chaos still unfolding in his house. Police technicians combed through the master bedroom, gathering evidence. His children were being questioned separately. The body of Richard Dawson had been removed, but the image of it remained seared in Tony's mind. On his computer screen, he scrolled through security footage from his own home system. 3 years ago, he'd installed cameras throughout the property, except in bedrooms and bathrooms. Diana had insisted on that privacy boundary. Now he understood why. The footage from the past week showed nothing unusual. Diana coming and going on a regular schedule. But Tony had backdated the search to 6 months and found a pattern. Every Thursday, when Tony had his standing poker game with colleagues, Diana would enter the bedroom at precisely 8:30 p.m. and not emerge until close to midnight. On those same nights, there was no record of Richard Dawson entering the house through any door. Tony rubbed his temples. There must be another entrance. Diana had literally created a secret passage into their home. A knock at the office door interrupted his thoughts. Detective Summers stood there, his expression unreadable. "Mr. Walsh, we need to discuss some inconsistencies we're finding." Tony gestured to the chair across from his desk. "Of course." Detective Summers sat, notebook in hand. "Your wife's gallery assistant confirmed that Mrs. Walsh hasn't been to work in 3 days. She called in sick on Monday, which the assistant found unusual because she never misses work. 3 days." Tony's voice was tight. "She's been leaving the house every morning at her usual time." "Apparently not going to the gallery," Summers replied. "We're checking security footage from the neighboring businesses to track her movements." Tony leaned back in his chair. "My wife clearly isn't who I thought she was. But I can assure you, Detective, that I knew nothing about any of this until today." Summers studied him. "Your security company is one of the best in New England, Mr. Walsh. Hard to believe you wouldn't notice irregularities in your own home." "I trusted my wife," Tony said flatly. "A mistake I won't make again." After the detective left, Tony unlocked a hidden drawer in his desk and removed a small device. It was a prototype his company had been developing, a tracking system that could be activated remotely on any phone that had ever connected to their home Wi-Fi. He'd installed it as a safety measure for his family. Diana had taken her phone, and now this technology would be her undoing. Within minutes, he had a location. Diana's phone was active at a motel off Highway 90, about 30 miles west of Boston. She was running, but not very strategically. Tony pocketed his own phone and headed downstairs. Brady and Lily sat huddled together in the kitchen while a female officer sat across from them, asking gentle questions. When they saw Tony, both teenagers looked up with identical expressions of confusion and betrayal. "Dad, what's happening?" Lily asked. "They're saying Mom might have killed Mr. Dawson." "I don't know everything yet," Tony said carefully, "but I need you both to stay here with the officers. I have to go out for a while." Brady stood up. "No way. You can't leave us here." Tony placed a firm hand on his son's shoulder. "I need you to trust me. I'll explain everything when I get back. Right now, I have to find your mother before she disappears completely." Against his children's protests, Tony left the house. He had a clear destination and a clearer purpose. First, he would find Diana. Then he would discover exactly what game she had been playing. And finally, he would ensure she paid for every lie she had told, every betrayal she had committed. As he drove toward the motel, Tony's mind traveled back to their beginning. He had met Diana Lawrence at a charity auction 23 years ago. She had been stunning, tall, elegant, with an encyclopedic knowledge of Renaissance art that had charmed him. Their courtship had been a whirlwind, their marriage seemingly solid. She had supported his ambitions as he built Walsh Security from a small local operation to a company that now protected some of the most valuable properties in New England. He had given her everything: a beautiful home, financial freedom to pursue her passion for art, the best schools for their children. And in return, she had built a life on lies. As the motel came into view, A dingy two-story building with peeling paint, Tony felt nothing but cold determination. The Diana he had loved was a fabrication. The real Diana was about to meet the real Tony Walsh, a man who had clawed his way up from nothing, who had faced down competitors and criminals alike, and who never, ever forgave a betrayal. Chapter 3. Facade. The Twilight Motel's vacancy sign flickered as Tony pulled into the parking lot. Room 212's curtains were drawn tight, but a sliver of light escaped from the edges. Diana's phone signal placed her inside. Tony approached the room cautiously. He could call Detective Summers, but police involvement would mean loss of control. Tony Walsh didn't surrender control. He knocked sharply on the door. "Housekeeping," he called, disguising his voice. Silence followed. Then footsteps approached the door. "We don't need service," came Diana's voice, tight with tension. "Diana," Tony said calmly. "Open the door." The silence stretched for several heartbeats. Then the lock clicked, and the door swung open to reveal Diana, her normally perfect appearance disheveled, her designer clothes replaced by jeans and a plain sweater, her eyes wild with fear. "Tony," she breathed. "How did you find you?" He stepped into the room, forcing her to back up. "You've forgotten what I do for a living." The motel room was sparse, a queen bed with rumpled sheets, a chipped laminate desk, and a duffel bag half filled with clothes. On the desk lay 3 passports and several stacks of cash. "You need to leave," Diana said urgently. "You don't understand what's happening." Tony closed the door behind him. "No, I don't. So why don't you explain why there was a dead man in our bedroom closet? Why you have multiple passports? Why you've been lying to me for what I assume has been our entire marriage?" Diana sank onto the edge of the bed. "It's complicated. Simplify it," Tony replied coldly. "Rich and I," Diana began, then paused. "It wasn't what you think. We weren't just having an affair." "That much is obvious," Tony said. "The police found the secret room. They know about the money and the fake IDs. What were you involved in, Diana? Art theft? Money laundering?" Diana's laugh was hollow. "Nothing so pedestrian." She looked up at him, her blue eyes suddenly clear and calculating. "How well do you really know me, Tony? Did you ever wonder why I was so interested in you when we met?" "Because I was wealthy and ambitious," Tony replied bluntly. She shook her head slowly. "You weren't wealthy then. You were a security consultant with big dreams and useful skills." She leaned forward. "You were a mark." The words hit Tony like a physical blow. "A mark for what?" "Rich and I work for an organization that acquires information from influential people. We identify targets, establish relationships, gather intelligence." Tony stared at her, stunned. "You're telling me you're some kind of spy? That our entire marriage was an assignment?" Diana flinched. "It started that way. Your clients include some of the most powerful people in New England. Your security systems protect their homes, their secrets. And you thought you could use me to get to them." Tony finished, the pieces falling into a horrible place. 22 years, Diana. 2 children. Was any of it real? Something flickered across Diana's face. Regret, perhaps, or simply calculation. Lily and Brady weren't part of the plan. They were complications. "But I do love them, Tony." "Don't you dare talk about my children," Tony snarled, his composure cracking. "If they weren't part of your plan, who ordered the hit on Rich? Was it your organization tying up loose ends?" Diana's eyes widened. "Rich is dead." Tony studied her reaction, the genuine shock in her expression, the color draining from her face. Either she was an exceptional actress, or she truly didn't know. "Found him in our closet with a bullet through his chest," Tony said flatly. "In your secret room." Diana stood suddenly, grabbing the passports and cash from the desk. "We need to leave. Now. They're cleaning house." "Who's that?" Tony demanded. "The foundation," Diana replied, stuffing the items into her duffel bag. "Rich must have made a mistake. Or they discovered he was skimming funds. Either way, they've initiated shutdown protocols, which means everyone connected to this operation is in danger." She zipped the bag and turned to Tony. "Including you and the kids." Tony blocked her path to the door. "You expect me to believe this? To trust you?" "You don't have to trust me," Diana said coldly. "But if you want to keep our children safe, you'll listen." The people I work for won't hesitate to eliminate loose ends. That includes family members. Tony felt rage building inside him. Pure, devastating fury at the deception, at the threat to his children, at the mockery she had made of their life together. But beneath the rage was something colder and more focused, strategic thinking. If what you're saying is true, he said carefully, then going to the police is the safest option. Protection for all of us while they investigate. Diana shook her head vehemently. The Foundation has people everywhere, including law enforcement. Why do you think I ran instead of going to the police when I realized Rich was compromised? So what's your plan? Keep running forever. I have resources, Diana replied. Contacts, safe houses that even the Foundation doesn't know about. Places where I can disappear. Tony studied the woman he had believed was his devoted wife. In her place stood a stranger, calculating, ruthless, and clearly accustomed to living in the shadows. And what about Brady and Lily? He asked quietly. For the first time, Diana's composure faltered. I want them to come with me. They'll be safer. Absolutely not, Tony said, his voice like steel. They stay with me. Diana stepped closer, her expression hardening. Don't be a fool, Tony. You can't protect them from this. The Foundation will. The Foundation will have to go through me, Tony interrupted. And unlike you, I don't pretend to be something I'm not. I built my business by understanding threats and neutralizing them. If what you're saying is true, then I'll deal with it. But you, he stepped aside from the door. You need to disappear. Now, before I change my mind and call Detective Summers. Diana searched his face, looking for a crack in his resolve. Finding none, she shouldered her bag and moved to the door. I'll find a way to contact you securely. There are things you need to know. Don't bother, Tony replied coldly. As far as I'm concerned, Diana Walsh died today. My wife never existed. Something that might have been pain flickered across Diana's face. 22 years wasn't all a lie, Tony. Remember that. Get out, Tony said quietly. After Diana left, Tony sat on the edge of the bed, allowing himself exactly 5 minutes of shock and grief. Then he pulled out his phone and made a call to an old contact, someone who operated in the shadows, but owed Tony a significant favor. Felix, he said when the man answered, I need everything you can find on an organization called the Foundation, and I need surveillance on my wife. She's running, but I want to know exactly where she goes. As he hung up, Tony's mind was already formulating a plan. Diana and her organization had chosen the wrong man to deceive. They had mistaken his integrity for weakness, his trust for blindness. They were about to discover their fatal error. Tony Walsh didn't just build security systems. He had built an empire on understanding vulnerabilities and exploiting them. Now, he would use every resource, every connection, every ruthless instinct he had developed over decades to protect his children and to destroy the people who had turned his life into an elaborate lie. The hunt had begun. Chapter 4. Calculated Moves. 3 days after discovering his wife's secret life, Tony sat in his home office, surrounded by monitors displaying information that would have been inaccessible to most civilians. Felix had delivered beyond expectations, providing a digital trail that painted a disturbing picture of the Foundation, a shadow organization that specialized in long-term intelligence gathering from powerful individuals across government, business, and technology sectors. Diana and Richard hadn't been mere operatives. They had been architects, responsible for crafting deep cover identities and managing networks of agents. The Boston operation had been active for over 25 years, with Diana as its centerpiece since she was recruited from her Ivy League art history program. Tony's computer pinged with an alert. Felix had located Diana again after she had disappeared from the motel. She was now in Montreal, checking into a boutique hotel under the name Catherine Miller, one of the aliases from her collection of passports. Tony made a note of the location, but didn't immediately pass it to his surveillance team. He wanted Diana to believe she had escaped, to feel secure enough to make contact with her handlers. Every move she made would reveal another thread in the Foundation's network. A knock at the door interrupted his thoughts. Lily stood in the doorway, her usual confident demeanor replaced by uncertainty. Dad, can we talk? Tony immediately closed the files on his computer, Of course. Come in. Lily sat across from him, twisting her hands in her lap. The police were here again this morning while you were on your conference call. They wanted to know if Mom had contacted us. Has she? Tony asked carefully. Lily hesitated. She texted me last night. Just said she loved me and was sorry for everything. Asked me not to tell anyone she'd reached out. She met Tony's eyes. I didn't answer her. Tony felt a surge of pride mixed with sadness. His daughter shouldn't have to navigate this kind of betrayal. You did the right thing telling me. Dad, what's really going on? The police said Mom might be involved in something illegal, but they wouldn't give details. Tony had decided on a modified truth for his children. They deserved to know why their mother had disappeared, but he would shield them from the full scope of Diana's betrayal. Your mother and Richard were involved in some kind of corporate espionage, he said carefully, using the art gallery as a cover to gather information from wealthy clients. Lily's eyes widened. So she was what? A spy or something? Something like that, Tony confirmed. I don't have all the details yet, but it appears she's been living a double life for many years. Even before you met? Lily asked, her voice small. Tony nodded, watching the implications sink in for his daughter. Her next question cut straight to the heart of his own pain. So is marrying you part of her mission? I believe so, Tony said quietly. Tears welled in Lily's eyes. What about Brady and me? Were we just props for a cover story? Tony reached across the desk and took his daughter's hand. Listen to me. Whatever your mother's original intentions, I've seen how she is with you and your brother. That love isn't something you can fake for 19 years. It was the one kindness he would allow Diana in this narrative, letting their children believe she truly loved them, even if everything else had been a lie. Lily wiped her eyes. What happens now? Now, Tony said firmly, we protect each other. The people your mother worked for might still consider us a security risk. I'm taking precautions. He squeezed her hand. I need you to trust me and follow some new security protocols I'm putting in place. After Lily left, Tony returned to his investigation. He had identified 3 key figures in the Foundation's local hierarchy. Benjamin Frost, a venture capitalist who served on several charitable boards with Diana. Olivia Ryder, the dean of art history at Boston University, who had mentored Diana for years. And Thomas Quinn, a real estate developer whose properties included the building that housed Diana's gallery. All 3 had connections to the same obscure investment firm, Helios Partners, which Tony now suspected was a Foundation front. All 3 had access to valuable information networks through their professional roles. And all 3 had been carefully cultivated as part of Diana's social circle. Tony picked up his phone and dialed a number. Senator Wilson's office. Answered a crisp female voice. This is Anthony Walsh for the senator, Tony replied. It's regarding his home security upgrade. Within moments, Senator Wilson came on the line. Tony, tell me you've got that new system ready to install. My wife's been on my case about those false alarms. Actually, Senator, I need a favor. It's somewhat sensitive. The senator's voice lowered. What kind of favor are we talking about? I need information about a private investment group called Helios Partners. They may be involved in activities that threaten national security. That's a serious allegation, Wilson said cautiously. I wouldn't ask if it weren't important, Tony replied. And if I'm right, you might want to reconsider who handles your D.C. apartment security. Senator Wilson had been a client for over a decade. More importantly, he sat on the Intelligence Committee and owed Tony for discreetly handling a security breach at his vacation home that could have become a scandal. I'll see what I can find, Wilson said finally. But Tony, if this involves something illegal, it's personal, Senator. My wife was involved with these people. Now she's on the run, and my family may be in danger. The line went silent for a moment. I'll call you back within 24 hours, Wilson finally said. After hanging up, Tony checked the time. Brady would be home from basketball practice soon, and Tony needed to brief him on the new security measures. But first, he had one more call to make. He dialed another number from memory. When a gruff voice answered, Tony didn't waste time on pleasantries. Vince, it's Tony Walsh. I'm calling in that marker from Pittsburgh. Vincent Garza had been Tony's roommate during his brief stint in the Marines before Tony was recruited by a private security firm. Now, Vince ran his own team of security specialists who operated in legally ambiguous territory. I figured this day would come, Vince replied. What do you need? Protection detail for my kids. And some specialized equipment that won't be traced back to me. Trouble in paradise? Vince asked. You could say that, Tony answered grimly. My wife turns out to be working for a shadow intelligence organization. They've killed her partner and might come after my family next. Vince whistled low. Damn, Tony. You don't do anything halfway, do you? Can you help or not? For you? Absolutely. My team can be in Boston tomorrow. Send the details to our secure channel. As Tony ended the call, he heard the front door open and Brady's voice calling out. He shut down his computer and headed downstairs, mentally shifting gears from hunter to father. Brady stood in the kitchen, rummaging through the refrigerator. At 17, he was already taller than Tony, with Diana's lean build and Tony's dark hair. When he saw his father, his expression darkened. Any word from Mom? He asked, trying to sound casual and failing. Not directly, Tony replied, but I'm tracking her movements. Brady slammed the refrigerator door. So, she really did kill Mr. Dawson? She's really some kind of criminal? We don't know that she killed anyone, Tony said carefully. But she was involved in something illegal, yes. Brady leaned against the counter, his young face twisted with confusion and anger. I don't understand. Mom is like the most normal person ever. She makes us eat vegetables. She volunteers at the art museum. How could she be some kind of spy? That was the point, Tony said gently. The perfect cover. So what now? We just wait for the police to find her. Tony considered his next words carefully. Brady was intelligent and perceptive, too perceptive to be fed the sanitized version Tony had given Lily. Brady, I need you to listen carefully. Your mother was part of an organization that gathers intelligence on powerful people. They use that information for leverage, for profit, maybe for more. They killed Richard when he became a liability, and they might view us as liabilities too. Brady's eyes widened. Are we in danger? Potentially, Tony acknowledged. Which is why I'm bringing in private security for both you and Lily. And why we're going to establish some new protocols. What kind of protocols? No routine. Varied routes to school and activities. New phones with enhanced security. And for the next few weeks, no going anywhere alone. Brady absorbed this with surprising calm. Then he asked the question Tony had been dreading. Are you going after them? The people Mom worked for. Tony met his son's eyes. Yes. Good, Brady said firmly. How can I help? In that moment, Tony saw something in his son he recognized, a steely resolve that mirrored his own. Brady wasn't just Diana's son. He was Tony's too. And unlike Diana, Tony had never hidden his true nature from his children. They knew he could be ruthless when necessary, uncompromising when threatened. For now, your job is to protect yourself and your sister, Tony replied. Follow the security protocols. Stay vigilant. And most importantly, if your mother contacts you, tell me immediately. Brady nodded, then asked, Do you think she ever really loved us? Tony thought about Diana's face when she'd held their children as newborns, the genuine pride she'd shown at their accomplishments, the maternal ferocity with which she'd defended them when necessary. I think loving you both was the one real thing in her life, Tony said honestly, which makes what she did all the more unforgivable. Because that was the truth at the core of Tony's rage. Not just that Diana had betrayed him, but that she had been willing to risk their children's safety and happiness for her mission. That was something Tony could never forgive. As Brady headed upstairs to shower, Tony's phone buzzed with a text from Felix. Package delivered to your secure server. Names, faces, locations. The Foundation isn't as invisible as they think. Tony smiled grimly. The chessboard was set. Now it was time to make his opening move. Chapter 5. Counterintelligence. 1 week after Diana's disappearance, Tony sat in the back of a nondescript sedan, watching Benjamin Frost leave his Beacon Hill townhouse. Frost moved with the confident stride of a man accustomed to power and insulated from consequences. A man who had no idea he was being hunted. Target is on the move, said Vince from the driver's seat. Looks like he's heading to his regular breakfast spot. Tony nodded, reviewing the dossier he'd compiled on Frost. 57 years old, divorced twice, no children. Harvard Business School, then a meteoric rise through investment banking before founding his own venture capital firm. On paper, he was merely successful. In reality, according to Senator Wilson's confidential information, Frost was a key recruiter for the foundation, identifying vulnerable talent at elite universities and funneling them into the organization. He's made contact with your wife 3 times in the past month, reported Elena, Vince's surveillance specialist from the passenger seat. Always in public places, always brief. They're careful. Tony closed the file. Not careful enough. The plan was simple but effective. They wouldn't confront Frost directly. That would trigger foundation protocols and potentially endanger Lily and Brady. Instead, they would use Frost to map the organization's communication network to identify vulnerabilities that Tony could exploit. He's entering the restaurant, Vince reported. Same table by the window. Tony checked his watch. Right on schedule. Elena, you're up. Elena exited the car, transforming her posture and expression as she did. The sharp-eyed surveillance expert vanished, replaced by a harried professional woman checking her phone as she hurried into the same restaurant. Through the tiny earpiece, Tony heard ambient restaurant noise, then Elena's voice as she bumped into someone. "Oh, I'm so sorry." "No harm done," came a male voice, Frost. "Wait, aren't you Benjamin Frost?" Elena continued, her tone perfectly calibrated to sound like an admiring professional. "I heard you talk at the Venture Capital Symposium last month. Your insights on biotech investments were fascinating." Tony smiled grimly as he listened to Frost respond with practiced modesty. Elena would now engineer a brief conversation, during which she would plant the specialized tracking device disguised as a business card in Frost's jacket pocket. The device would not only track Frost's movements, but would capture data from any electronic devices within 2 feet. Phones, tablets, laptops. 20 minutes later, Elena returned to the car. Device planted. He was completely oblivious. "Good work," Tony said, his mind already moving to the next phase. Now we wait. Over the next 48 hours, Frost's movements painted a revealing picture. He visited Olivia Ryder at Boston University, spent 2 hours at a private club with Thomas Quinn, and made 3 calls to a burner phone that pinged off towers near Diana's gallery. Most importantly, he accessed a secure server through a VPN that Felix was now working to penetrate. On the 3rd day of surveillance, Tony received an encrypted message from Felix, server cracked. "Downloading data now. You won't believe what I'm finding." That evening, Tony met Felix in a private room at his club in downtown Boston. Felix, a thin, nervous man with perpetually disheveled hair, laid a laptop on the table between them. "The Foundation keeps detailed files on all their operations," Felix explained, his fingers flying over the keyboard, "including complete profiles of their agents and targets." He turned the screen toward Tony. "Here's yours." Tony stared at his own face on the screen, alongside a comprehensive dossier that documented his entire life, from his working-class childhood in South Boston to his military service, his rise through the security industry, and his current client list. Most disturbing were the detailed psychological assessments, identifying his strengths, weaknesses, and pressure points. "They've been watching me my entire adult life," Tony murmured. Felix nodded grimly. "Diana was assigned to you before you even met. They flagged you as a potential asset because of your security expertise and your growing client base among Boston's elite." Tony felt cold rage building as he scrolled through the file. "They knew everything, my favorite foods, my political leanings, even my taste in women." He looked up at Felix. "They created Diana Lawrence specifically to appeal to me." "Not exactly," Felix said, pulling up another file. "Diana Walsh, born Diana Mitchell in Syracuse, New York, recruited during her sophomore year at Cornell. They didn't create her identity. They shaped her to be exactly what you'd be attracted to." Tony stared at Diana's file, at the young woman she had been before the Foundation molded her into his perfect match. "What else did you find?" Felix's expression turned grim. "They're cleaning house, Tony. Richard wasn't the only operative eliminated in the past week. 3 other Foundation agents across the country have died in accidents. They're shutting down the entire North American division. Why? From what I can piece together, someone high up in the organization is under federal investigation. They're erasing evidence. Felix hesitated, including Diana. Tony's head snapped up. What do you mean? There's a termination order for her, dated 3 days ago. Tony absorbed this information with cold calculation. Diana's betrayal had shattered whatever love he had felt for her, but the idea of her being hunted and killed still triggered something protective in him. Not for her sake, but for his children's. Can you access their communications network? Tony asked. I need to know who's coordinating this cleanup operation. Felix nodded. Already working on it. But Tony, these people are serious players. They have connections in intelligence agencies worldwide. If they realize you're onto them, they won't, Tony interrupted, because we're going to use their own methods against them. He pulled out his phone and showed Felix a series of text messages. Conversations between Brady and Diana that Tony had fabricated using a clone version of his son's phone. You're setting a trap, Felix realized, using the kids as bait. Not exactly, Tony corrected. I'm creating the illusion that Diana is trying to extract Brady and Lily. The Foundation will monitor the situation, hoping Diana leads them to whatever evidence she took when she fled. And then what? Tony's expression hardened. Then I dismantle their organization piece by piece, starting with Frost, Ryder, and Quinn. How? Felix asked, looking nervous. By giving them exactly what they fear most, exposure. Tony stood, straightening his suit jacket. Keep monitoring that server. I need to know the moment they take the bait. As Tony left the club, his phone rang with a call from an unknown number. He answered cautiously. Mr. Walsh, came a familiar voice. This is Detective Summers. We need to talk about some new developments in your wife's case. I'm listening, Tony replied, signaling to Vince to start recording the call. We've received information suggesting your wife may have been involved in espionage activities, Summers said carefully, potentially targeting some of your high-profile clients. Tony's mind raced. Either the police had made surprising progress in their investigation, or someone was using Summers to fish for information. That's quite an allegation, Detective, Tony said neutrally. Do you have evidence? We're pursuing several leads, Summers replied. It would help if we could speak in person, perhaps at your office tomorrow morning. I'll have my attorney present, Tony countered. There was a pause, slightly too long. Of course. Shall we say 9 o'clock? Fine, Tony agreed, then ended the call. He turned to Vince. Run a voice analysis on that recording. Compare it to previous conversations with Summers. Vince nodded, already typing on his tablet. Within minutes, he looked up with confirmation of Tony's suspicion. 93% match, but the speech patterns are off. This guy's good, but he's not Summers. Tony smiled grimly. The Foundation was making their move sooner than expected. They're getting sloppy. Let's use that. When the fake Summers arrived at Tony's office the next morning, he was greeted not by Tony, but by the real Detective Summers and 2 uniformed officers, alerted by Tony with evidence of the impersonation attempt. As Tony watched the man being led away in handcuffs from his hidden observation room, he felt the first real satisfaction since this nightmare began. The Foundation had underestimated him, assuming he would be too emotional, too reactive to see through their deception. They didn't understand that Anthony Walsh had built his success on reading people, on anticipating threats before they materialized. Diana might have been his blind spot, but her betrayal had removed those blinders permanently. Now, as he returned to his main office where Brady and Lily waited with Vince and his security team, Tony knew they had taken the first real step toward dismantling the organization that had infiltrated their lives. What happens next? Brady asked, his young face serious beyond his years. Next, Tony said, we bring your mother home, on our terms. Chapter 6, Stratagem. The secluded lake house in New Hampshire had been Tony's secret for years, purchased through a shell company, off the grid, with no connection to his public identity. Even Diana didn't know about it. He had bought it as a potential safe house for high-value clients, but now it would serve a different purpose, the perfect setting for an endgame. Tony stood on the dock, watching the sun set over the water as he finalized his plans. Behind him, the lake house was being transformed by Vince's team. Security systems installed, surveillance equipment positioned, the perimeter secured. By morning, it would be both a fortress and a trap. His phone buzzed with a message from Felix. She took the bait. Diana accessed the messages from Brady's clone phone. Her current location is an apartment in Montreal. Tony texted back, "Keep tracking. Alert me if she moves." The fabricated messages between Brady and Diana suggested that the teenagers were struggling with police surveillance and felt unsafe, creating the perfect opening for Diana to attempt contact. The final message, sent yesterday, had included a critical piece of information. Tony had supposedly taken the children to a family cabin upstate to escape media attention. Tony knew Diana well enough, the real Diana, the operative, not the manufactured wife, to predict her next move. She would not risk her children being drawn into the Foundation's cleanup operation. She would come for them, and when she did, Tony would be waiting. He turned as footsteps approached along the dock. Lily stood there, wrapped in a sweater against the evening chill. "Dad, can we talk?" Tony nodded, gesturing for her to join him. "What's on your mind?" Lily leaned against the railing, staring out at the water. "I know what you're doing, using us as bait to draw Mom out." Tony studied his daughter's profile, so like Diana's, but with an openness, a genuineness that Diana had always carefully crafted rather than naturally possessed. "Not exactly," he corrected gently. "I'm creating a scenario where your mother believes you might be in danger, yes. But you and Brady are completely safe here. Vince's team is the best in the business. You think she'll really come for us?" "Yes," Tony said with certainty. "Whatever else she's been lying about, her instinct to protect you both is real." Lily turned to face him, her expression troubled. "And when she comes, what then?" This was the question Tony had been wrestling with since discovering Diana's betrayal. What exactly did justice look like in this situation? What did revenge look like? "I need information from her," Tony said carefully. "About the Foundation, about who ordered Richard's killing, about whether there's still a threat to our family." And after that, Lily pressed. Tony saw the real question in his daughter's eyes. "Are you going to kill her?" The fact that his own child could believe him capable of this should have troubled him. Instead, it validated the reputation he had cultivated. The ruthless businessman who destroyed competitors, who never left a debt unpaid. After that, Tony said quietly, "She faces the consequences of her choices." Lily seemed to accept this ambiguous answer. "Brady's really struggling with all this. He keeps saying if Mom was lying about who she is, maybe we don't really know who you are either." Tony hadn't expected this angle, though perhaps he should have. Diana's betrayal had shaken the foundations of their family's reality. It was natural for the children to question everything, including him. "Your brother knows who I am," Tony said firmly. "I've never pretended to be anything other than what I am. A man who protects what's his, who builds things that last, who doesn't tolerate betrayal." "That's what scares him," Lily said simply. "He thinks you'll never forgive Mom, no matter what her reasons might have been." "And you?" Tony asked. "Do you think she deserves forgiveness?" Lily was quiet for a long moment. "I don't know. I keep thinking about all the time she was there for me, helping with school projects, teaching me to drive, staying up all night when I had that awful flu last year." She shook her head slowly. Was she just playing a role all those times? How could someone fake that kind of love for 19 years? Tony had no answer that wouldn't sound hollow. Instead, he put his arm around his daughter's shoulders. "Whatever happens with your mother, nothing changes between us. You and Brady are my world, Lily. That's the one certainty in all of this." Later that night, as Tony reviewed the security feeds from his makeshift command center in the lake house's study, his phone rang with an encrypted call from Felix. "She's on the move," Felix reported. "Crossed the border into Vermont 2 hours ago. Based on her trajectory, she'll reach New Hampshire by morning. Any sign she's being followed? Not that I can detect, but the Foundation has resources beyond what we could track." Tony nodded, though Felix couldn't see him. "Keep monitoring." "And Felix? When this is over, you'll have that clean slate we discussed. New identity, new location, all traces of your past wiped." "Appreciate that, Tony," Felix replied. "But just so you know, I'm not doing this just for the payout. What they did to you. Using your whole life as some kind of operation. That's messed up. Some lines shouldn't be crossed. After ending the call, Tony opened his laptop and activated a program that Felix had created. On the screen appeared a countdown clock. 36 hours until the program would automatically upload the Foundation's complete operational files to servers belonging to the FBI, CIA, and several international intelligence agencies. Only Tony could stop the countdown. A final insurance policy. A soft knock at the study door interrupted his thoughts. Brady stood in the doorway, his tall frame silhouetted against the hallway light. "Can't sleep?" Tony asked. Brady shook his head and entered the room, dropping into the chair across from Tony's desk. "This is insane, you know that, right? Like this whole situation is something out of a movie." Tony smiled faintly. "Life is often stranger than fiction." "Lily thinks you're going to kill Mom," Brady said bluntly. Tony met his son's direct gaze. "What do you think?" Brady studied him for a long moment. "I think you're capable of it, but I don't think you will." He leaned forward. "Not because you still love her or anything, but because killing her would be too simple. You like things complicated, thorough." Tony was struck by how well his son understood him, perhaps better than Diana ever had, despite her years of professional observation. "You're right," Tony acknowledged. "Death would be too quick, too clean for what she's done." Brady nodded, seeming oddly relieved by this cold assessment. "So what's the actual plan?" Tony considered how much to share with his 17-year-old son. Brady had demonstrated remarkable composure throughout this crisis, but he was still a child in many ways. "The Foundation exists in shadows," Tony explained. "Their power comes from secrecy, from operating beyond accountability. I intend to drag them into the light. And Mom, your mother took something when she fled. Information the Foundation desperately wants back. That's why they're hunting her. That's why they killed Richard. And you're using us to draw her out so you can get that information first," Brady finished. "Yes." Brady didn't seem shocked or offended by this admission. Instead, he appeared to be processing it with the same analytical mindset Tony himself might employ. "Will we be safe after all this is over?" "Yes," Tony said with certainty. "Because when I'm finished, the Foundation won't exist anymore." Brady studied him for a moment longer, then nodded once and stood. "Okay then, just make sure you finish what you start, Dad, because I'm pretty sure these aren't people who give second chances." As Brady left, Tony turned back to his computer, marveling at his son's resilience. When this was over, when the threat was eliminated, he would need to have serious conversations with both children about their future. They carried Diana's blood, her intelligence, perhaps even some of her capacity for deception. Tony would need to channel those inherited traits toward more constructive paths. The security system pinged softly, alerting him to movement on the property perimeter. Tony checked the camera feed and saw a deer wandering through the woods. Not the intruder he was anticipating, but a reminder to stay vigilant. Dawn was breaking over the lake when another alert sounded. This one from a sensor placed on the access road, 2 miles from the house. Tony checked the camera and saw a rental car approaching slowly, cautiously. Diana had arrived sooner than expected. Tony activated the full security protocol with a keystroke, then opened his desk drawer and removed a handgun. He checked the magazine, then tucked the weapon into his waistband at the small of his back, accessible but concealed. Next, he woke Vince and his team, who took their positions throughout the property. Brady and Lily were moved to a secure room in the basement, despite their protests. Finally, Tony took a seat in the living room, positioned to see both the front entrance and the large windows overlooking the lake. He poured himself a cup of coffee from the thermos beside his chair and waited. He didn't have to wait long. 20 minutes later, the front door opened silently, the security system disarmed by a code that only Tony should have known. Diana slipped inside, moving with a predator's grace that Tony had never seen in his seemingly conventional wife. She wore dark clothing, her hair pulled back in a practical ponytail, a small backpack slung over one shoulder. She carried no visible weapon, but Tony had no doubt she was armed. "They're not here, Diana," Tony said calmly from his seat. Diana froze, then slowly turned toward his voice. Tony. Her voice betrayed no surprise, only a weary resignation. I should have known. Yes, you should have, Tony agreed, taking a sip of his coffee. After 22 years of studying me, you should have anticipated that I wouldn't leave our children vulnerable. Diana's eyes scanned the room, assessing exits, threats, opportunities. Where are they? Safe, Tony replied, which is more than I can say for you. Diana moved further into the room, maintaining a careful distance. You have no idea what you're dealing with, Tony. The foundation is finished, Tony interrupted. As we speak, their entire operational database is being prepared for distribution to law enforcement and intelligence agencies worldwide. Names, locations, missions, everything. For the first time, Tony saw genuine shock on Diana's face. That's not possible. Their security protocols are impressive, but not infallible, Tony finished. Especially when Benjamin Frost helpfully provided access to their secure server. Diana sank onto the couch across from him, her composure cracking. You don't understand what you've done. These people, they have contingencies for exactly this scenario. They'll activate sleeper agents in every agency that receives that information. The data will be discredited, the investigation buried. Perhaps, Tony acknowledged. But it only takes one honest agent, one piece of evidence that can't be explained away, one thread that, when pulled, unravels their entire operation. He leaned forward, and I've created dozens of those threads. Diana studied him with new eyes, not as her husband, but as an adversary whose capabilities she had severely underestimated. What do you want from me, Tony? She finally asked. The truth, he replied simply. All of it, starting with why the Foundation targeted me in the first place. Diana hesitated, clearly weighing her options. Then she unzipped her backpack and removed a small external hard drive. This is everything, she said quietly. The real reason for the Boston operation, the identities of all Foundation assets in New England, and the location of their primary funding sources. She placed the drive on the coffee table between them. It's what Richard died for. He wanted to sell this information. I wanted to use it as leverage to extract myself and Brady and Lily from the Foundation's reach. Tony made no move to take the drive. Why should I believe anything you say now? Diana met his gaze directly. Because I have nothing left to lose. The Foundation wants me dead. The authorities want me in custody. She faltered for the first time. You already believe the worst of me. The only thing I care about now is ensuring our children's safety. Our children, Tony repeated coldly. The ones who were never supposed to exist. The complications in your mission. Diana flinched. I never meant for them to hear that. But you meant it, Tony pressed. When I first became pregnant with Lily, yes, the Foundation considered terminating the pregnancy, or the entire operation, Diana admitted. Children weren't part of the profile they had constructed for me. They represented an unknown variable, a potential compromise to my cover. Yet you had not one, but 2 children, Tony pointed out. Because I fought for them, Diana said fiercely. Because even before Lily was born, I knew I would do anything to protect her. That's when I started keeping secrets from the Foundation, creating contingencies they didn't know about. Tony studied the woman before him, this stranger who wore his wife's face. You expect me to believe that in 22 years of living a lie, motherhood was your only authentic experience. Diana's laugh was hollow. Not the only one. She looked away, then back at him. There were moments, Tony, real moments, when I forgot about the mission, about the Foundation, when it was just us. Spare me the sentimentality, Tony said coldly. If there had been anything real between us, you would have warned me when the Foundation started killing its operatives. I tried, Diana insisted. The night before everything happened, I tried to convince you to take that security consulting job in Singapore, to get us all out of Boston before the cleanup operation began. Tony remembered the conversation, Diana's unusual insistence that he consider an international position he'd previously shown no interest in. At the time, he'd attributed it to her desire for a change of scenery. Not good enough, he said flatly. Not nearly good enough for what you've done. The resignation in Diana's eyes told him she hadn't expected forgiveness. What happens now? Tony reached for the hard drive. Now I use this to finish what I've started. And you disappear permanently from our lives. And if I refuse? Diana challenged. If I want to see my children before I go? That's not going to happen, Tony said firmly. Brady and Lily have suffered enough betrayal. Seeing you now would only deepen the wounds. Diana's expression hardened. You don't get to make that decision unilaterally. They're my children too, regardless of how they came to be. You forfeited that right when you... Tony's response was cut short by the sound of breaking glass from somewhere in the house, followed by the distinctive pop of a flashbang grenade. Instantly, the room filled with acrid smoke. Diana was on her feet in a fluid motion. Foundation tactical team, she said urgently. We need to move. Now. Tony grabbed the hard drive and his weapon as Diana pulled a handgun from beneath her jacket. The practiced way she checked the chamber and released the safety was yet another reminder of the stranger she truly was. Brady and Lily, Tony said, already moving toward the basement door. They'll have targeted all exits, Diana responded. We need to create a diversion. Before Tony could respond, the living room windows exploded inward as black-clad figures breached the house from multiple entry points. Diana grabbed Tony's arm and pulled him toward the kitchen as gunfire erupted behind them. Where's your security team? She demanded as they took cover behind the kitchen island. Positioned around the property perimeter, Tony replied grimly. The Foundation team had somehow bypassed his outer defenses. Diana peered around the island, then fired 3 rapid shots that dropped an approaching figure. We need to get to the kids before they do. In that moment, with their lives under immediate threat, Tony made a split-second decision. He tossed Diana the extra magazine from his pocket. Basement safe room. Southeast corner. Reinforced door with a biometric lock. Diana nodded once, then moved toward the hallway, firing precisely as she advanced. Tony followed, covering their rear as they fought their way toward the basement stairs. As they reached the door, a new figure appeared at the end of the hallway. A tall, elegant woman Tony recognized immediately from his research. Olivia Ryder. Diana, Ryder called, her voice carrying over the chaos. This has gone far enough. Hand over the drive, and perhaps we can negotiate terms. Diana pushed Tony toward the basement door. Get to the kids. I'll hold them off. Diana, go, she insisted. They're what matters now. As Tony descended the stairs, he heard Diana's cool reply to her former handler. The terms have changed, Olivia. The entire operation is blown. The last thing Tony saw before the basement door closed behind him was Diana advancing toward Ryder, weapon raised, the consummate operative protecting her final mission. Chapter 7. Crucible. The safe room was 15 feet square, with concrete walls, no windows, and a single reinforced door that could withstand an explosion. Inside, Brady and Lily sat on a small couch, their faces pale but composed as Tony entered. What's happening? Brady demanded, rising to his feet. We heard gunshots. Foundation tactical team, Tony replied tersely, crossing to the control panel mounted on the wall. He activated the security monitors, which showed feed from cameras throughout the house. They've breached the main floor. Where's Mom? Lily asked, moving to his side. Tony hesitated, then gestured to one of the monitors. On the screen, Diana was engaged in a firefight with 2 Foundation operatives, her movements precise and lethal. As they watched, she dispatched both attackers with clinical efficiency. That's Mom, Brady whispered, staring at the screen in disbelief. That's who your mother really is, Tony confirmed grimly. Another monitor showed Vince and his team regrouping outside, preparing to counter the Foundation's assault. But they were outnumbered and outgunned. Tony activated the room's communication system. Vince status report. They came in through the tunnels. Vince's voice replied, punctuated by gunfire. Professional job. At least 12 operatives, maybe more. Can you reach us? Negative. They got the house surrounded. We're trying to create an extraction point at the east entrance. Tony checked the ammunition in his weapon. Hold position. We'll try to reach you. Dad, you can't go back out there, Lily protested. We can't stay here either, Tony replied. This room was designed to withstand an attack, but not indefinitely. They'll break through eventually. Brady stepped forward. Then I'm coming with you. Absolutely not, Tony said firmly. You and Lily will use the escape tunnel. It leads to a boathouse half a mile down the shore. What about you? Lily asked, her voice small. Tony checked the monitors again. Diana had retreated to the kitchen, where she was pinned down by fire from the living room. Olivia Ryder stood in the doorway, calmly directing her operatives. Your mother and I will deal with this, Tony said, the words feeling strange in his mouth. Then I'll meet you at the rendezvous point. You going to help her? Brady asked incredulously. After everything she did, Tony met his son's eyes. Right now, your mother is the only person in that house who wants to keep you safe as much as I do. That makes her an ally, temporarily. He moved to a cabinet built into the wall and unlocked it with his thumbprint, revealing several weapons. He selected a compact shotgun and additional ammunition. Brady, you remember how to use this? He asked, holding out a 9mm handgun. Brady nodded, taking the weapon with steady hands. Tony had taught both children basic firearm safety and operation years ago, another precaution from a man who built his life around anticipating threats. Emergency use only, Tony emphasized. Your priority is to get Lily to the boathouse and wait for my signal. What signal? Lily asked. Tony handed her a satellite phone. I'll call this number. If you don't hear from me within 2 hours, contact this man. He gave her a business card with a single name and number. He'll get you both to safety. Dad, Brady began, his voice cracking. Tony pulled both teenagers into a fierce embrace. Listen to me. Whatever happens, whatever you learn about your mother or me, know this. Every decision I've ever made has been to protect you both. That hasn't changed. That will never change. After instructing them on accessing the escape tunnel, Tony returned to the monitors for a final assessment. Diana had moved from the kitchen to the dining room, methodically eliminating Foundation operatives as she went. Her technique was flawless, the work of someone with years of specialized training. Tony activated his earpiece. Diana, can you hear me? After a moment of static, her voice came through. Tony, where are you? Safe room. The children are evacuating through an alternate route. Good, she replied, her breath coming fast. Ryder brought her A-team. These aren't ordinary operatives, they're cleaners. How many left? At least 8, including Ryder. They're trying to flank me from the study. Tony checked the monitor showing that area. I see them. I can create a diversion from the basement stairs. That should give you an opening to reach the main hallway. Heading there now, Diana confirmed. And Tony, thank you. Don't mistake necessity for forgiveness, Tony replied coldly. We still have unfinished business. As he prepared to leave the safe room, Tony tucked the hard drive securely into an inner pocket of his jacket. Whatever happened next, this evidence needed to survive. The basement stairs emerged into a small alcove off the main hallway. Tony could hear movement above him, the careful footsteps of trained operatives searching the house room by room. He readied his weapon, took a deep breath, and charged up the stairs. The first Foundation operative never saw him coming. Tony took him down with a silent tackle, disarming him in one swift movement. The second operatives managed to fire a shot that grazed Tony's shoulder before Tony's return fire found its mark. The gunshots triggered a flurry of activity as remaining Foundation members converged on his position. Tony ducked into the alcove as bullets splintered the wood paneling around him. From the opposite end of the hallway, Diana appeared, firing with precision at the exposed operatives. The coordinated attack, husband and wife fighting side by side with lethal efficiency, momentarily pushed back the Foundation team. Diana reached Tony's position, pressing her back against the wall beside him as they both reloaded. Just like Budapest, she said with a grim smile. Tony stared at her. We've never been to Budapest. No, but I have, Diana replied. With a different partner, on a different mission. She peered around the corner. Ryder's retreating toward the front of the house. She'll be calling for extraction. We need to end this now, Tony said decisively. Before reinforcements arrive. Diana nodded, her expression turning serious. "Tony, if something happens to me, save it," he interrupted. "I'm not interested in deathbed confessions or last-minute redemption." Diana studied him for a moment, then nodded once. "Fair enough. Ready." Together, they moved through the house with the synchronized movements of people who had shared a life for over 2 decades, anticipating each other's actions, covering vulnerabilities, communicating with glances and gestures. Tony found himself slipping into a rhythm with this woman. Not the Diana he had married, but perhaps someone more authentic than that carefully constructed facade had ever been. They cornered Ryder in the front sitting room. The elegant academic-turned-spy had dropped all pretense of refinement. She stood behind an antique desk, weapon trained on them, her expression calculating. "Diana," Ryder said calmly, "I trained you better than this. Sentiment has always been your weakness." "Not sentiment," Diana corrected, her own weapon unwavering. "Clarity. The foundation is compromised, Olivia. Cut your losses." Ryder's laugh was brittle. "You think this is about the foundation? This is about survival. That drive contains information that could destroy people far more powerful than any of us." "The children are gone," Tony interjected. "Your team is decimated. There's no path to victory here." "Children," Ryder echoed with disdain. "The fatal flaw in an otherwise perfect operation. I advised termination when Diana first became pregnant. If the committee had listened, we wouldn't be here now." Diana's expression hardened. "You authorized the hit on Richard. He became greedy," Ryder replied dismissively, "just as you became sentimental. Both of you forgot your purpose." "And what purpose is that?" Tony demanded. "Creating elaborate lies? Manipulating people's lives for information." Ryder regarded him with something like pity. "You still don't understand, do you? The Foundation doesn't just gather intelligence. We shape history. The information Diana has stolen could rewrite the political landscape of this country." A crash from outside indicated that Vince and his team were making their move. Ryder's eyes flicked toward the window, a momentary distraction that Diana exploited. Her shot caught Ryder in the shoulder, spinning the older woman backward. Tony moved forward to secure Ryder's weapon, but the Foundation leader had one final move. As he approached, she triggered a device in her pocket. Instantly, all the electronics in the room died, including the security system. "Electromagnetic pulse," Diana explained grimly. "Standard Foundation protocol for compromised safe houses." Tony secured Ryder's hands with a zip tie from his pocket. "Is she the last one?" Diana nodded. "The others will have retreated when they realized they were outmatched." She touched her earpiece. "But communications are down. We need to reach the children." Tony was already moving toward the door when the structure of the house seemed to groan around them. The foundation, the actual foundation, not the organization, shifted perceptibly. "What was that?" Tony demanded. Ryder smiled through her pain. "Insurance policy. If we can't secure the evidence, no one can. The house has been wired with explosives since we arrived." Diana grabbed Tony's arm. "We need to move. Now." They raced from the room as the first explosion rocked the east wing of the house. The carefully planned destruction was sequential, designed to bring down the structure systematically, leaving no evidence behind. As they reached the front door, Vince appeared through the smoke. "Tony, this way." The three of them sprinted across the lawn as the lake house began to collapse behind them. They reached the tree line just as the final, massive explosion turned the entire structure into a fireball that lit up the morning sky. Tony turned to Diana, who was watching the destruction with an unreadable expression. "The tunnel, will it hold?" "It should," Diana replied. "It's deeper than their charges would have reached." She met his eyes. "But we need to get to the boathouse quickly." Tony nodded to Vince. "Secure Ryder and any surviving Foundation operatives. I'll contact you when we've retrieved the children." As they made their way through the woods toward the lakeshore, Tony maintained a careful distance from Diana. The adrenaline of combat was fading, and with it, the temporary alliance necessitated by survival. "The hard drive," Diana said after several minutes of tense silence. "Did you secure it?" Tony patted his jacket pocket. "Safe, though I'm not sure what good it does us now. with all our electronics fried by Ryder's EMP. The data is what matters, Diana replied. With it, we can still expose the Foundation and, more importantly, protect Brady and Lily from any future retaliation. Tony stopped walking, forcing Diana to turn and face him. Let me be absolutely clear. After we retrieve the children, you and I are done. You'll have no contact with Brady or Lily unless they specifically request it when they're adults. Diana's face betrayed a flash of pain before her operative's mask slipped back into place. I understand your position, but they're my children too, Tony. I carried them. I raised them, while lying to them about everything that matters. Tony finished coldly. You don't get to claim motherhood as the one authentic part of your life when everything surrounding it was fabricated. Not everything, Diana said quietly. Not them. Not how I feel about them. She hesitated, then added, and not everything about us. Tony laughed harshly. Spare me the sentimentality. You were assigned to me. You studied me. You became exactly what I wanted in a partner because that was your job. At first, yes, Diana acknowledged. But 22 years is a long time to sustain a complete fiction, Tony. People blend into their covers. Real feelings develop. And yet you never warned me, Tony countered. You never chose us over your mission. Diana looked away. I made my choices. I'll live with the consequences. She gestured toward the path ahead. We should keep moving. As they neared the boathouse, Tony activated the satellite phone, the only device that would have survived the EMP. Brady? Lily? Are you there? After a moment of static, Brady's voice came through. Dad? We're here. We're okay. Relief flooded through Tony. Stay put. We're almost there. Diana's expression softened at the sound of their son's voice. They made it. No thanks to you or your organization, Tony replied tersely. The boathouse came into view, a simple structure built over the water's edge, with a small dock extending into the lake. As they approached, Brady emerged, weapon still in hand, his young face a mask of suspicion as he spotted Diana. Dad, he called uncertainly. It's okay, Tony reassured him. The situation is contained. Brady lowered the gun, but maintained his distance from Diana. Mom, he said flatly. Diana stepped forward cautiously. Brady, are you hurt? Is Lily okay? We're fine, Brady replied coldly. No thanks to you. Lily appeared in the boathouse doorway, her expression a complex mixture of relief, fear, and uncertainty. Mom? Dad? Diana moved toward her daughter, but Lily shrank back. The rejection was clear, and Diana stopped, pain evident in her eyes despite her attempted composure. The house is gone, Tony informed them, but we have what we need to ensure our safety. He patted the pocket containing the hard drive. What happens now? Brady asked. Tony looked at Diana, then back at his children. Now we finish this. Once and for all. Chapter 8, Severance. 3 days after the destruction of the lake house, Tony sat in the secure conference room of his company headquarters, surrounded by monitors displaying data recovered from Diana's hard drive. Felix worked silently at a nearby computer, organizing the information into usable intelligence. The Foundation's secrets were laid bare before them. Decades of operations targeting influential figures across government, industry, and finance. The information Diana had stolen included not just operational details, but evidence of high-level corruption that reached into the upper echelons of power. This is bigger than we thought, Felix murmured, pushing his glasses up his nose. These offshore accounts link directly to 3 senators, a federal judge, and at least 2 Fortune 500 CEOs. Tony nodded absently, his focus on a different file, the complete history of Operation Safeguard, the mission that had placed Diana in his life. The document confirmed what she had told him. He had been targeted not for himself, but for his growing security business and its high-profile clientele. The operation had been authorized 23 years ago, with Diana selected from a pool of potential operatives based on psychological profiles, indicating she could maintain a long-term deep cover assignment. She had been given extensive training in art history to support her cover identity, along with behavioral conditioning to ensure she could convincingly portray the kind of woman Tony would be attracted to. Most disturbing were the quarterly evaluations Diana had submitted to her handlers. Clinical assessments of Tony's expanding business, his client relationships, his vulnerabilities. Reading them felt like a violation more intimate than any physical betrayal could have been. Yet as the reports progressed through the years, Tony noticed subtle changes. Diana's assessments became less detailed, more perfunctory. She began omitting personal information, focusing solely on business intelligence that could have been gathered without intimate access to his life. After Lily's birth, the reports dropped to biannual submissions, with increasing redactions where personal details would have been included. She was pulling away from them. Tony murmured to himself. "What's that?" Felix asked, looking up from his work. Tony shook his head. "Nothing important." He closed the file and turned to more pressing matters. "What's the status on the evidence packages?" Felix gestured to his screen. "Ready for distribution. I've created secure channels to the FBI's Public Corruption Unit, the Senate Intelligence Committee, and 3 trusted journalists. One command from you, and it all goes live. And the family contingency? Also ready," Felix confirmed. "New identities for you, Brady, and Lily. Funds transferred to untraceable accounts. Properties secured in 3 different countries. If necessary, you can disappear completely within 24 hours. Tony nodded with satisfaction. In the aftermath of the Lake House battle, he had moved quickly to secure his children's future. Brady and Lily were currently at a private estate in the Berkshires, protected by Vince's team, while Tony completed his endgame strategy. "And Diana?" Felix asked carefully. Tony's expression hardened. "What about her?" "She's still in custody at your secondary facility. Vince reports she's been cooperative, providing additional context for the Foundation files. Do you want her included in the family extraction plan?" "No," Tony said firmly. "Once we've confirmed the Foundation is neutralized, she goes her own way." Felix hesitated. "She did save your life at the lake house. And the kids. She endangered us in the first place," Tony countered. "Her actions may have delayed the Foundation's plans, but don't mistake self-preservation for nobility." Before Felix could respond, Tony's secure phone buzzed with a message from Brady. "Mom wants to talk to us. Says it's important. What should we do?" Tony stared at the message, anger rising within him. Diana had been explicitly instructed not to contact the children directly. Yet here she was, already violating the one boundary he had established. He typed a response. "I'll handle it. Don't respond to her. I need to step out," he told Felix. "Continue preparing the evidence packages. I want them ready to deploy by tonight." The drive to the secondary facility, a converted warehouse on the outskirts of Boston that Tony used for sensitive operations, took 40 minutes. During that time, Tony's anger crystallized into cold determination. Diana had proven once again that she couldn't be trusted, that she would always choose her own agenda over his explicit instructions. Vince met him at the entrance. "She's been asking to see the kids since yesterday. Says she has information about potential Foundation sleeper agents that might target them specifically." "And you believe her?" Tony asked skeptically. Vince shrugged. "She's been straight with us about everything else so far. All her intelligence has checked out." Tony followed him through the facility to a comfortable but secure living area where Diana was being held. Unlike a traditional cell, the space included a bedroom, sitting area, and private bathroom. Dignified accommodations that reflected her cooperation rather than her trustworthiness. Diana was seated at a small table, reviewing documents. She looked up as Tony entered, Vince remaining outside to give them privacy. "Tony," she greeted him, her expression neutral. "Thank you for coming. You contacted Brady directly," Tony said without preamble. "After I explicitly told you not to." Diana set down her pen. "I have information they need to know about Foundation protocols specifically designed to target family members. You could have relayed that information through me or Vince. Would you have shared it with them?" Diana challenged. "Or would you have filtered it, controlled it, like you're controlling?" Tony's jaw tightened. "I'm protecting them from further trauma. From you." Diana stood, frustration breaking through her composed exterior. "They're not just your children, Tony. They're mine too. And they're not children anymore. They're young adults who deserve to understand the full scope of the danger they face. The danger you brought into their lives, Tony emphasized. Yes, Diana acknowledged, surprising him with her directness. The danger I helped create, which is why I have a responsibility to help them navigate it. Tony studied the woman before him. Still beautiful, still familiar in her movements and expressions, yet fundamentally a stranger. What is it you think they need to know that I can't tell them? Diana hesitated, then reached for a file on the table. The Foundation doesn't just train operatives for intelligence gathering. They create sleeper agents specifically tasked with long-term retribution against anyone who betrays the organization. She opened the file to reveal photographs of ordinary-looking people: a mail carrier, a high school teacher, a barista. These individuals have been conditioned to activate if certain parameters are met. They live normal lives, often for decades, with no awareness of their programming until a specific trigger event occurs. Tony took the file, examining the photographs with growing concern. And you believe such agents might target Brady and Lily? I know they will, Diana said grimly. The moment we release that data, every sleeper in the Boston area will receive their activation codes. Some are programmed for sabotage, others for assassination. How many in this region? At least 30 that I know of. But there could be more operatives placed by other handlers that weren't in my network. Tony closed the file, his tactical mind already calculating countermeasures. This changes the extraction timeline. We'll need to move the children immediately before we release the evidence. It's not that simple, Diana countered. These sleepers are placed in transportation hubs, hospitality services, security companies. The moment you try to move Brady and Lily through conventional channels, you risk exposure. So what do you suggest? Tony asked, his tone making it clear he was humoring her rather than seeking her counsel. I know the Foundation's protocols. I know how to identify sleeper agents, how to avoid triggering their programming. Diana met his eyes directly. I need to be part of the extraction team. Tony laughed harshly. Absolutely not. You expect me to trust you with our children's safety after everything that's happened. I expect you to recognize that when it comes to the Foundation, I know things you don't, Diana replied evenly. Things that could mean the difference between life and death for Brady and Lily. Tony paced the small room, weighing options, calculating risks. Diana watched him silently, allowing him space to process. Even if what you're saying is true, he finally said, once the children are safely away and the evidence is released, what then? You expect to remain part of their lives? To play mother after 22 years of lies? Diana's composure faltered for the first time. I don't expect anything. I don't deserve anything. But Brady and Lily deserve the truth. All of it. Not just your version. She stepped closer to him, and they deserve the chance to decide for themselves whether they want me in their lives. The truth, Tony repeated bitterly. Coming from you, that's rich. I've lied about many things, Diana acknowledged quietly, but never about loving them, never about wanting to protect them. Tony studied her face, searching for signs of manipulation or deception, skills he had honed over decades in business, but that had failed him completely with this woman. I'll consider your information about the sleeper agents, he finally said, but you will not be part of the extraction team. And any communication with Brady and Lily happens on my terms, under my supervision. Diana nodded, accepting these boundaries with a resignation that suggested she had expected nothing more. There's one other thing you should know, she added as Tony turned to leave. About Richard's death. Tony paused at the door. What about it? He wasn't killed because he was selling information, Diana said carefully. He was killed because he discovered something about Operation Safeguard that even I didn't know, something buried in the earliest planning documents. Tony turned back to face her. Which was? You weren't the original target, Diana replied. Your father was. Tony stared at her, genuinely shocked for the first time since this ordeal began. My father? The dock worker who died of a heart attack when I was 22. Diana nodded grimly. Except he wasn't just a dock worker. According to Richard's findings, your father was an undercover federal agent investigating union corruption at the Boston docks. He was getting close to exposing connections between the union leadership and an international criminal syndicate. That's absurd, Tony dismissed. My father was a simple man. Hard-working, uncomplicated. The perfect cover, Diana interrupted gently. Just as my art historian persona was for me. The foundation arranged your father's heart attack to protect their interests in the shipping industry. But then they became interested in you, the son who was demonstrating unusual aptitude in security systems, who was rising quickly through the private security sector. Tony's mind raced, reevaluating decades of memories through this new lens. His father's unusual hours, the mysterious phone calls, the foreign books hidden in the garage, the unexpected visitors who spoke to his father in hushed tones. You expect me to believe this? He asked, but his voice lacked conviction. Check the files, Diana suggested. The complete history of Operation Safeguard is on that hard drive, including the preliminary surveillance on your father and the authorization for his termination. Tony left without another word, his world tilting on its axis for the second time in a week. He drove back to his office in a daze, memories of his father flickering through his mind like an old film reel, details suddenly taking on new significance. Upon returning, he immediately instructed Felix to search the hard drive for any references to Michael Walsh, Tony's father. Within an hour, Felix had uncovered a heavily encrypted file that confirmed Diana's story, complete with surveillance photographs of Tony's father meeting with federal agents, transcripts of intercepted communications, and finally, the clinical report detailing his cardiac incident. The Foundation had not just destroyed Tony's present by infiltrating his life. They had destroyed his past by taking his father. The revelation transformed his already considerable rage into something colder and more focused. An implacable determination to dismantle the organization that had shaped his entire existence without his knowledge. That evening, Tony called a meeting with his core team, Felix, Vince, and Elena. Together, they revised the extraction plan for Brady and Lily, incorporating Diana's intelligence about sleeper agents while keeping her physically separated from the operation. The children leave tonight, Tony instructed. Full blackout protocols. No electronic communications, no credit cards, no use of existing identities. And the evidence packages? Felix asked. Release them the moment we have confirmation that Brady and Lily are secure, Tony replied. Every minute we delay gives the Foundation time to cover their tracks. As the team dispersed to implement the plan, Tony remained alone in the conference room, staring at a photograph of his father that he'd retrieved from his personal files. The man smiled broadly at the camera, one arm around young Tony's shoulders, the other holding up a prized fishing catch. Had he known then that he was living on borrowed time? Had he suspected that his work was placing his family at risk? Would he approve of the man Tony had become, and the vengeance he now intended to exact? The satellite phone on the table buzzed with an incoming message from Vince. Package secure. Proceeding to extraction point Alpha. Brady and Lily were safely on their way to a private airfield, where they would board a plane to a secure location overseas. They would remain there until Tony had confirmed the Foundation had been neutralized, however long that took, whatever methods it required. Tony picked up the phone to call Diana's guards. It was time for one final conversation before he severed all ties with a woman who had pretended to be his wife for 22 years. Chapter 9. Terminus. The private airfield outside Boston operated on a no-questions-asked basis for clients who could afford absolute discretion. Under normal circumstances, Tony would have considered such an operation a security risk. Tonight, it served his purposes perfectly. He stood on the tarmac beside a sleek Gulfstream jet, watching as Vince's team completed their final security sweep. Brady and Lily had already boarded, their faces somber as they prepared for an indefinite exile from the only home they had ever known. Diana stood several feet away, flanked by two of Vince's operatives. After careful consideration, Tony had allowed her to come to the airfield, not out of sentimentality, but strategic necessity. Her knowledge of Foundation protocols had already identified and neutralized two potential sleeper agents during the extraction process. The pilot reports weather conditions are optimal, Vince informed Tony as he descended the jet stairs. They'll reach the first waypoint by dawn. Tony nodded. Any sign of surveillance or pursuit? None. We followed all the countermeasures Diana suggested. If she's right about the sleeper activation sequences, we got ahead of them. Tony glanced toward Diana, who stood rigid in the chilly night air, her eyes fixed on the jet that would take her children away. After a moment's hesitation, he approached her. "They're secured," he said simply. "The evidence packages will be released within the hour." Diana nodded, her expression carefully controlled. "Thank you for allowing me to help with the extraction plan." "It was a tactical decision, not a personal one," Tony clarified coldly. "I know." Diana hesitated, then asked, "Will you let me say goodbye to them?" Tony studied her face, the face he had woken up beside for decades, the face he had once believed he knew better than his own. Now, he searched it for signs of manipulation, for the calculated performance of a trained operative. Instead, he saw only genuine grief and resignation, the expression of a woman who understood she was losing everything that mattered to her, and who accepted this loss as the consequence of her own actions. 5 minutes, Tony conceded. "I'll be present the entire time." Relief flashed across Diana's features. "Thank you." Tony signaled to the guards, who escorted them both to the jet's entrance. Inside, Brady and Lily looked up with surprise as their mother appeared in the doorway. "Mom," Lily said uncertainly, her voice small. Diana remained at the threshold, making no move to approach them without invitation. "I wanted to say goodbye, and to tell you both how sorry I am for everything that's happened." Brady's expression hardened. "Sorry doesn't really cover it, does it?" "No," Diana acknowledged quietly. "It doesn't. Nothing can." She took a deep breath. "I want to ask for your forgiveness. I don't deserve it, but I want you to know that however this all began, my love for you both is the most real thing in my life." Lily stood slowly, her young face a mask of conflicting emotions. "Was any of it real? Our family? The trips we took? The stories you told us?" "The love was real," Diana replied. "The moments we shared were real. The person you knew as your mother, parts of her were real too." She smiled sadly. "The best parts. How are we supposed to know what to believe?" Brady demanded. "How can we ever trust anything you say?" Diana met her son's angry gaze without flinching. "You can't. I've given you no reason to trust me. All I can do is tell you the truth now and hope that someday you might be willing to hear it." "And what is the truth?" Lily asked. Diana glanced at Tony, who stood silently watching this exchange, then back at her children. "The truth is that I made choices, terrible, selfish choices, long before you were born. Choices that set us all on this path. But having you both changed me. It made me question everything I had believed in, everything I had committed to. But not enough to stop lying," Brady pointed out bitterly. "No," Diana admitted. "I told myself I was protecting you by maintaining my cover, that exposing the truth would put you in danger. But I was also protecting myself from losing you, from facing the consequences of what I had done." She took a tentative step into the cabin. "I know you have no reason to believe this, but I've spent the last 17 years trying to distance myself from the Foundation, to find a way out that wouldn't endanger you. Richard died because he was helping me create an escape plan for all of us." "All of us?" Tony interjected sharply. "Or just you and the children?" Diana met his gaze directly. "All of us. Despite everything, Tony, I couldn't bear the thought of what they might do to you if they decided you were a liability." She turned back to the children. "Your father never deserved any of this. The fact that he's standing here now, protecting you both, only confirms what I've always known about him, that his strength and determination are genuine, not fabricated like so much of my life has been." Brady and Lily exchanged glances, communicating silently in the way that only siblings can. Finally, Lily spoke. "We need time to process all of this." "Of course," Diana said quickly. "I understand. I don't hate you," Lily added, her voice breaking slightly. "I want to, but I can't. You're still my mom." Diana's composure cracked at these words, tears finally spilling down her cheeks. "Thank you for that. It's more than I deserve." Brady remained silent, his expression unreadable. Diana turned to him. "It's okay if you hate me, Brady. Your anger is completely justified." After a long moment, Brady spoke. "I don't hate you either, but I don't know who you are anymore. I need to figure that out for myself." Diana nodded, accepting his terms with visible gratitude. "That's fair. Time's up," Tony said quietly from behind her. Diana took one last look at her children, as if memorizing their faces. "Be safe. Look after each other. And know that I love you both, not as part of any mission or cover, but with everything that's real in me." As she turned to leave, Lily suddenly rushed forward and embraced her briefly. "Goodbye, Mom," she whispered. The unexpected gesture seemed to stagger Diana, who returned the hug fiercely before pulling away. "Goodbye, sweetheart." Brady remained seated, but raised his hand in a small, uncertain wave, a minimal acknowledgement that nonetheless seemed to mean everything to Diana. Tony escorted her back down the stairs to the tarmac, where the guards waited to return her to the secure facility. Before they took her away, Diana turned to Tony one last time. "What will you do now?" she asked quietly. "After the evidence is released and the foundation is exposed?" Tony studied her face in the harsh floodlights of the airfield. "I'll ensure the children are settled securely. Then I'll rebuild what your organization tried to destroy." Diana nodded, accepting this answer. "And us? What happens between us?" "There is no us," Tony replied coldly. "There never was. After tonight, we go our separate ways. You will not contact me or the children again unless they initiate it. You will disappear from our lives as completely as Diana Walsh disappeared from yours when you created her." Diana flinched slightly at the harshness of his words, but didn't argue. "I understand." She hesitated, then added, "For what it's worth, Tony, being your wife wasn't always a role I was playing." Somewhere along the way, the line between Diana Mitchell and Diana Walsh blurred. I began to forget which thoughts and feelings belonged to the operative and which belonged to the woman I had become with you. "Save your confessions for someone who might believe them," Tony replied dismissively. Diana accepted this rejection with quiet dignity. "Goodbye, Tony. I hope you and the children find peace eventually." As the guards led her away, Tony returned to the jet for a final farewell to his children. Brady and Lily sat side by side, their expressions weighted with the heavy legacy of truth they now carried. "We'll be joining you within a month," Tony assured them. "Once I've confirmed the foundation has been dismantled and any remaining threats neutralized." "What will happen to Mom?" Lily asked hesitantly. Tony's expression remained impassive. "She'll be given resources to establish a new identity, far from Boston. After that, her choices are her own." "Will we ever see her again?" Brady asked, his tone carefully neutral. "That decision will be yours to make when you're ready," Tony replied. "But not until I'm certain there's no remaining danger from the foundation." He embraced each of them, allowing himself a rare moment of visible emotion. "Remember everything I've taught you about staying vigilant, about trusting your instincts. Vince's people will be with you every step of the way, but ultimately, you need to look out for each other." As the jet's engines roared to life, Tony descended the stairs and watched from the tarmac as the aircraft taxied down the runway and lifted into the night sky. Only when it had disappeared from view did he return to his car, where Felix waited with a secure laptop. "Ready to release the evidence packages?" Felix asked. Tony nodded grimly. "Send them all, and activate the contingency measures we discussed." Felix's fingers flew across the keyboard, initiating the carefully orchestrated data dump that would expose the Foundation's operations to law enforcement agencies worldwide. Simultaneously, it would trigger financial algorithms that would freeze and then systematically dismantle the organization's funding networks. "It's done," Felix confirmed minutes later. "No turning back now." Tony smiled coldly. "Good. Now we move to Phase 2. Felix looked up sharply. "Phase 2? I thought exposing the Foundation was the end game." "Exposure is just the beginning," Tony replied. "Justice requires more personal attention." Over the following weeks, as the evidence packages triggered investigations and arrests across multiple countries, Tony systematically targeted the architects of Operation Safeguard, the individuals who had authorized his father's murder and Diana's insertion into his life. Some he destroyed through legal means, providing authorities with precisely the evidence needed to secure convictions. Others he ruined financially, using his extensive business connections to isolate and bankrupt them. For the most culpable, those directly involved in his father's death, he employed methods that left no trail, no evidence, only the certainty that justice, as Tony defined it, had been served. One by one, the Foundation's leadership was dismantled, some imprisoned, some financially ruined, some simply disappeared. Tony's vengeance was methodical, precise, and absolute. Diana, true to the terms of their final agreement, vanished completely. Tony's sources confirmed she had traveled to South America, then Europe, carefully covering her tracks as she established a new identity. He ensured she was monitored from a distance, not out of concern for her welfare, but to confirm she made no attempt to contact Brady or Lily. 3 months after the night at the airfield, Tony joined his children at their secure residence in New Zealand. The sprawling coastal property offered privacy, security, and a fresh start far from the shadows of Boston. As they sat together on the terrace overlooking the ocean, Lily asked the question that had clearly been on both teenagers' minds. Is it really over? Are we safe now? Tony nodded, allowing himself to relax slightly for the first time in months. The Foundation has been dismantled, their operatives arrested or neutralized, their financial resources seized. He smiled grimly. They no longer exist. And the people who killed grandfather? Brady asked quietly. The ones who sent Mom to spy on you. Tony met his son's gaze directly. They faced justice, he said simply. Brady held his father's gaze for a long moment, then nodded, seemingly satisfied with this answer. Tony recognized something in his son's eyes, a certain hardness, a clarity of purpose that mirrored his own. Diana's betrayal had matured Brady beyond his years, transforming a carefree teenager into a young man who understood the darker realities of the world. Will we ever go back to Boston? Lily asked. Eventually, Tony replied, but not to our old life. That chapter is closed. We'll build something new, something based on truth this time. As the conversation turned to plans for the future, new identities, new businesses, new beginnings, Tony felt the cold satisfaction of complete victory. He had protected his children. He had avenged his father. He had destroyed the organization that had manipulated his entire life. Diana's betrayal had shattered the foundation of his existence. But from those ruins, Tony had constructed something stronger, more resilient. A life built not on the illusions of trust, but on the certainties of power and control. In the end, the Foundation had created their own destroyer. They had chosen Anthony Walsh as a target because they believed they could manipulate him, use him, control him. Instead, they had awakened a relentless adversary who would accept nothing less than their complete annihilation. As night fell over their new home, Tony watched his children, the only genuine legacy of his marriage to Diana, and allowed himself a moment of grim pride. They had survived. They had emerged stronger. And like their father, they had learned the most valuable lesson of all. Forgiveness was a luxury afforded only to those who had never been truly betrayed. The devastating truth Diana had hidden had been exposed, but the true revelation was what that exposure had unleashed. The ruthless, uncompromising nature that Tony had always possessed but had tempered with trust and compassion. Now, freed from those constraints, he had become exactly what the Foundation had feared most. A man with nothing left to lose and everything to avenge. And in that transformation lay his ultimate victory. And there you have it. Another story comes to an end. What did you think? I'd love to hear your thoughts in the comments below. If you enjoy this story, consider joining our community by subscribing. It means the world to us. For more stories like this one, check out the recommended videos on screen. And I'll see you there.